prayers. One I did was thinking, Cherie, Casey told me that her mom was able to go home from the hospital today, so that was good. She had, you're like, well, wait a minute, I thought she was already home. Well, yeah, she was, and then she went back in again. She just goes in and out, in and out. What's that?
1 night.
Oh, she just stayed 1 night. Okay. Just set a record. Okay, we are in 1 Timothy, and according to my notes, we left off at verse 12. So, just by way of review, we will remember that the Apostle Paul has left Timothy in Ephesus for the purpose of helping people see, that's the best way, maybe the kindest way we can say it, but help people see that they're teaching error, to see that they are trusting in the wrong things like genealogies and fables, and that many of them had backslid, as we would say, and they're back in doing these things of the flesh, lustly things of the flesh. And so he says that if it is the case that I, the Apostle Paul, can change by the gospel, then these people can change. So pray. And as I was going through, I always go back over my notes and proofread them and so forth. And I was thinking about the kids, that were those who maybe you have kids or grandkids that have fallen away from the Lord. Pray, and I know you do. But just remind you, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't pray for my kids. Pray for them. That's what God says. Pray for them. And pray for kings and for all. And then what we did is we moved into the role of women in the Lord's church. And we said that we want to remember chapter 3 and verse 15 as we're going through this, because at that point Paul says, I'm telling you how these instructions so that people know how to conduct themselves in the house of God, which is the church. So that's what we're talking about, how those within the church are to conduct themselves. So, as I said, we left off verse 12. Let me read. We'll start at verse 8, just kind of get the context. He says, I desire, therefore, that men pray in every place, lifting up holy hands without wrath and disputing. In like manner, women adorn themselves in modest apparel with a sense of shame and sobriety, not with braided hair, gold, or pearls, or costly raiment, but that which becomes women professing godliness through good works. Let a woman learn in quietness with all subjection. And now verse 12, the new text. But I permit not a woman to teach, nor to have dominion over a man, but to be in quietness. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. So that's where we're at. So again, we'll have a lot of definitions to go through as we're looking at these. And the word teach, as we were looking at 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 7, where the Apostle Paul referenced himself as one who is a teacher, we looked at that very specific Greek word, and it had a very specific meaning. It was the idea of one whose occupation is to teach, to preach. This is what this person does. They're not out here as a plumber somewhere or whatever, they're not working in the hospital. This is their occupation. And so the word has to do with publicly addressing the assembly. And so when he says, I permit not a woman to teach, that's what he's saying. That I don't know how more specific it could get than this. And you know as well as I do, in the world we live in today, there are a lot of so-called churches that will put women in the pulpit, even though there are very specific things stated about this. And you get some help with this, because he says not to have dominion over a man, and that's to have power over. So we understand then that a teaching position, when one stands before the Lord's church, this is a position of authority. And so if a woman were to do that, then she would be exercising authority over others. And the Apostle Paul, by inspiration, says, I do not permit that to take place. But he says that they're to be in quietness. That is, they're to be quiet, tranquil, silent, and give silent attention. And I think that last week the verse 11 brought the discussion going. We think about what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 14 as well. The wording is very similar. And the definitions, as we say all the time, words have meanings. And when we define these words as they were used by God instead of an assumption of what these things mean, then everything starts falling in its proper place. You know, we stop being concerned about, oh, that woman said a comment in Bible class. Well, we've got to look at definitions. We've got to see what we're talking about here, so that we don't find ourselves saying some crazy things that have nothing to do with what the context is saying or the verse is saying. Now, at verse 13, again, I'll keep reiterating this because it's one of the most used Greek words, and you'll familiarize yourself with these things. I know that everyone's familiar with the ecclesia, right? What here, the very first word of verse 13 is for in English, which is gar in the Greek. And when you see that word, it means that we're about to be given a reason for something that was just said. A cause for what was just said. I do not permit women to be these teachers, to teach, to be in this authoritative position over men. And he says, here's the reason. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. Okay, so that's God's reason. I made man first, didn't make woman first. So that suggests to us that if man was made first, they're the ones who are over the ones who were made second. They were the first and foremost, and then Eve. Secondly, he says, and Adam was not beguiled, but the woman being beguiled has fallen into transgression. These are kind of, again, interesting definitions that are very telling, if you will. The word has fallen. Beguiled is the idea of being deceived. I think that we're probably all, it is as it is. The woman was beguiled. She was misled. And he explains how this happened. He says she had fallen. Now, I don't know what your version says, or mine says fallen, and that means to be in one's power, to be on his side, to come to one. So what he's saying is that Eve went to the side of the devil. She chose to be under his power. She came to him as opposed to being on the side of God. And so he is explaining what it means to be beguiled. So if the same thing happens to me, if I'm beguiled, if I'm misled today, it's because I am taking the side that I should not be taking instead of going to the side of God. Now, he says that she had fallen into transgression. Again, this is interesting because we say words have meanings. In English, these words are used in a lot of contexts, and the same English word is used instead of giving these different words that are used. But here, this word literally means to go by the side of, to pass beside or beyond, or to overstep. So she went to the other side, and in that process, she is going beside or passing beside or beyond or overstepping the reality of authority, which was God. Of the tree of the knowledge of the fruit, of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it. And that was the truth of the matter. That was the law, and that's what she was not to do. But the devil comes along and says something different. Well, I think I'm going to step over here. So she stepped aside the commandments of God. So these are the causes. Again, we got the Greek gar. For what causes a woman not to be? Why can't we have a woman up here? Well, this is Paul. This is not me or one of the elders, or some wise man saying this. This is the Word of God. So, and we reverence that. We respect it. This is our Creator, and this is what He's telling us. Now, verse 15 is interesting, and we can talk this out a little bit. He says, but, you have a contrast here, she cannot do this, but she can do this. But she shall be saved, that is, delivered from the bondage of sin, set free She shall be saved through, that is the instrument, childbearing, if they continue in faith, love, and sanctification with sobriety, that is a sound mind. So the question is, in what way would she be delivered from the bondage of sin by the instrument of childbearing? In the context of whether or not she has the authoritative right to stand before the brethren and teach. So the context is an issue of authority. Okay, so that context has to be considered in this. It's interesting because we'll find, we're not going to discuss it in full right now. It's in chapter 5 of this book, 1 Timothy chapter 5. But we find this same word used there at 1 Timothy 5, verse 14, where Paul said, I desire, therefore, that younger widows marry, bear children, rule the household, give no occasion to the adversary for reviling. So the point, here's the point contextually. The woman has not been left without authority, period. It's not as though, she is this second-class nothingness that has no authority to do absolutely anything. No, she rules the household. Now I want to reserve the discussion for that when we get there. But the point is, as you follow in context here, when she takes and understands her proper place in the church and her proper place in the home, there's her salvation. If she steps out of those roles, then she has lost that salvation. In other words, she has stepped aside. She sidestepped the greatest authority of all, and that is God. This is your place in the church. This is your place in the home. Love it, respect it, embrace it, enjoy it, because that is how God made you. Okay, any thoughts? Could we finish? That's the end of chapter 2. Go ahead, results.
I have a sister-in-law that lives in California, and when she came for my father-in-law's funeral, her brothers were talking about this. And I don't know what denomination she is because the lady calls herself bishop. And she brought up about women being authority and everything. And my sister-in-law goes, she said that part of the Bible, you might as well just tear that page out because times have changed. And I thought, I don't know what religion that is. I'm scared to ask her.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk about the bishop in this next chapter. But now, I'd say a similar story to that. Well, I was a brand new Christian, and I was in Washington, D.C. I had been transferred up there, and there was a young lady I was working with. She was a chemist, and we were talking about the Bible and women preaching and so forth, and she said that there was a Bowman preacher where she attended. I said, well, the Bible says that cannot be. And so I turned over to 1 Corinthians 14. I turned over here to 1 Timothy 3. And, well, I didn't do it immediately. She said she disagrees. Bible. She said Bible doesn't say that anywhere. So the next day I said, I'll bring my Bible up here. I said, we didn't have phones back then. But I had to bring my Bible the next day and show her. And I showed her right there in the Bible. And she said, I don't care. Your friend said, well, we can live in different times. But she said, I don't care. When you hear things like that, it sticks in your mind. Because, as a brand new Christian, I heard that. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. That's what it says, brother.
And my friend said, I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't believe that. Well, I don't know.
So I hope I'm not opening a can of worms.
No, don't do that. We don't have time for that.
I know, but so when it says she, it's not speaking of individual women, it's talking about womankind, correct? Because obviously there are women that have lived and died that have never married and never had children that aren't,
Well, it's a
held
good-
for that, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think you probably worded it the best. Womankind, if you want to put it like that, yeah. No, it's good. It's a good question, yeah. Susan,
What about the authority in the job force?
say again.
What about the woman's authority in the job force?
What about the
Can she have authority over man in the job force?
Why not? We're talking about the church here. So that's what we said. We got to keep the context here. This is in the church.
Strictly the church.
Yeah, this is in the church. So, you know, he doesn't say anything about that. You know, what goes on out in the world. Okay, so here's another thing. Can a woman teach somebody out in the world?
Yes.
Well, we have an example of a woman doing that. So he's talking about within the Lord's church. Okay.
We have example of a big boss woman in Proverbs 23. I mean, she did not purchase that field and do all that work herself. You know, she hired some people.
Well, yeah, that's a great example. The worthy woman you read through there, she was supervising all this work and purchasing fields, doing a lot of things that managers and stuff would do with there.
Well, the woman's not left without authority to teach in the church, because he says Titus 2 verse 4, the women are to teach the younger women, you know,
Yeah.
specific things. So as you pointed out, the woman has a place in the church, she has a place in the home, and she has a responsibility in teaching the younger women how to reverence their husbands and how to be a godly woman. That's what it's all about, authority.
Yeah, good point. If we just keep the definitions, if we keep these words, you know, she is not permitted to teach. Well, in our language, that can be, well, then they shouldn't be doing that back there. It says it right there. We've got to define our terms. Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead.
I'd like to be more specific a little bit about the childbearing part. I guess giving birth, having children, is that correct? So, if she's married and then we know some people that some women are able to have children, but they decided that they want children. Where does that stand?
Well, did you hear Casey's comments at all?
No, I didn't. You had her back with me.
She answered everything you just said.
I didn't hear it. I didn't hear
I didn't
that.
teach him anything.
No, okay, so this is, we're dealing with a woman's place within the church as far as authority issue goes, as opposed to what her authority would be in the home. So as a woman, okay, for example, some women, I know some women cannot have a child. So does that mean that they're not saved? The 1 Timothy 5 passage helps, because it helps us to see that in the home, she has her place of authority. The childbearing is a part of that.
Okay, but
Ruling the home is a part of it.
my example was some women can have children, but they decide they don't want any.
Okay, this is going to be a good point right here, okay? I would like everybody to listen very carefully. What we're about to do is get into the qualifications of elders, okay? And the qualifications of elders can cause this kind of a discussion. And what happens is that inevitably someone's going to raise their hand, and then another person, and there is an endless questioning of scenarios. And in a lot of scenarios, we're going to find ourselves, well, it just doesn't address that. So what are you given? You're given the command. What are you to do? Now you make a judgment as to, here's this situation, and here's what the commandment says. It didn't address that situation, did it? But we've got a situation. It's like the marriage, divorce, and remarriage question. Oh my. I mean, have you ever taught a class on marriage, divorce, and remarriage specifically? You're going to have people raise their hands with every kind of scenario there is. And all you can say is that here's what the commandment is. Now you make the judgment. That's what it says right here. This is what these words mean. My point is that we're about to get into a discussion, and we could bog ourselves down with endless questions that won't really help anything but upset people. So all I'm saying is be careful.
Well, I don't want to add to the endless questions, but this childbearing is not just childbearing in and of itself. This childbearing is through a woman that the Savior is going to come, the Savior of all mankind. So it's not just the fact that a woman can have kids and she's saved. No, that's not what it's saying at all.
No.
Because like Paul said, some women can't have children. So So, anyway, I'm
Right.
sorry I added to the confusion.
No, you're basically saying exactly what he said. So, I mean, the issue is her place in the home, ruling the home. And that involves raising children. You don't have children. Well, you're still a woman in the home. That's your place.
Yeah.
She has to have faith.
But it says,
There we go, right there. Did y'all hear that?
No.
The end of the verse. Read it again.
Says, I'll just read the whole 15. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control.
Holiness with self-control. That's where her salvation will be.
So this is women in general, not women specific. Because, yeah, you can, like you said, scenario it out and find women that never had the opportunity to marry and run their own home and never had the ability to have children, or, you know, decided not to have children because of some reason or other, you know, but they continue faith and love and holiness, and because they're a woman, they fall underneath that umbrella where they are saved through the childbearing of women in general. Correct?
Well, remember, he's not talking, this is talking about those in the church. Remember?
Yes, but if you're going to scenario it away, you're going to find someone like my sister who never got married and never had kids, never had her own house. She lives with my mom. So how does she apply to this? Well, she falls under the category of women in the church who no one can refute. She continues in faith and love and holiness, and she is
Keep talking it out, you'll figure it out.
subject to the men of the church, and no one can deny that.
Good. Yeah, okay, go ahead. I kind of wanted to move on, but that's
I'm
good.
throwing in your side, I know. You can't just say that this is talking about the woman only in her house, because it's talking about salvation here. You can be saved, you can have salvation through childbearing. That's not just talking about her job at the house. Is it not?
Okay. We can start over. Just back up a little bit. So we're dealing with a situation of authority. Okay? This is how we are to conduct ourselves within the house of God. 1 Timothy 3:15. The woman has no authority as far as a teacher goes in the church. She is not left without authority, period. Her authority is in the home. And so that's really what he's saying. And then we get into the scenarios. Well, she didn't have any children. Well, she couldn't have children. I don't know what to tell you. All I'm telling you is what it says. Her place is the home. Her rule is the home. And I think that we got to be careful trying to stretch things that are not there.
Well, I read this long over the years, and I always thought this. In the home, there's only one person that can bear children, and that's the wife, whether she does or not. So that's kind of like her job.
Well, it would be part of it, part of ruling your house,
It's ruling the house,
raising
that's how
raising children, and so
So
forth.
whether she had children or not, I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay, yeah. So the issue is at the start of it, she shall be saved, delivered. How? When she's in her God-ordained place.
There you go.
Her God-ordained place is not being a teacher of that one who has this occupation. So where is her place? Her place, her rule is the home.
Her authority, right?
That's where her authority is.
I'm going to get into another rabbit hole here and leave that alone.
Yeah, I don't like that, but go ahead.
My 20th question.
We got teachers in the back now. We got women teaching back here in the back, in classes. Okay, so that we're having a Bible study. We're not having a worship service as per se. If we were, then we'd be in violation of Scripture here.
Okay, so that goes back to what Larry's already said.
I didn't hear.
He addressed that whole scenario. He addressed it from Titus.
Did y'all hear?
The women are to teach the younger women. So yeah, we talked about that.
Okay, but I mean, is it teaching young boys and girls too?
So what we said a while ago is that if we don't keep the definitions in their proper place, what do? We wind up making some crazy statements. Carla's back there in sin.
Okay?
But if you keep the definitions, you don't have any problems with that. What is the definition?
Well, can a woman teach, how old does a young man need to be before she can't teach?
What is the definition?
Well, it says, I do not allow a woman to teach.
Well, what is the definition of a teaching? I'm just not going to let anybody get away with all this kind of craziness. We're going to stick with definitions, and then you'll find yourself not asking things that are not what it's saying. These things resolve themselves, and I've been in so many classes before where the whole audience gets into a big argument because we're losing track of the definitions. She is not permitted to have an occupation of teaching where she exerts authority over a man.
Christians.
That's the end of, that's the short and long of it, right there.
There's nothing else to say, really, other than getting arguments. And that's what happens. And we can't let that happen. And I don't think that's happening, but it's up to teachers. Shut it down quick, or else it'll get out of control.
I'm scared to say anything.
Sorry.
But this whole idea of childbearing here was introduced by verse 14. It said Adam was not deceived. It was Eve that was deceived. And she was one in the transgression. Nevertheless, she says she shall be saved in childbearing if they remain true to the faith, charity, holiness, and sobriety. As you pointed out, it introduced, he permits, that means it does not allow a woman to teach, usurp authority over men. End of it.
Her authority is in the home.
Her authority is in the home.
And the first Timothy 5:7 passage is really helpful. And when we get over there, we'll discuss more about what that rule is. I didn't want to spend all of our class time talking about that tonight because that's going to be chapter 5. So I hope everybody's okay. I don't know. In my mind, sometimes I see things, I see the definition, it's crystal clear, let's go. But it's not going to be like that with some, and I don't want to just mow over people. We've got to all be on the same page, and so ask questions. I understand, but I can't let things get out of control. Okay, all right, can we move to chapter 3 now? Are we good?
Let's go to 3.
All right, let's go to chapter 3 then. So now he's going to talk about another authoritative role. You have men, you have women, but not all men have the authority of what we're about to discuss. And that is your version probably says the overseer. Go ahead.
And remember, we still talk about in the church.
Still talking about in the church. That's a good point. Yeah, because this would make crazy sense if we started, what the example Brother Dawes brought up all about this woman bishop and so forth. Now, let's read. He says, faithful is the saying, if a man seeks the office of a bishop, he desires good work. Okay. That word bishop there in the American Standard Version, it's likely that you have a different word. Some versions say bishop, some versions say overseer. It's episkopos in the Greek. And so what I wanted to do with the little bit of time we have left is talk about some definitions. And when we look at the definitions of this individual, then we will see the natural work of the individual. You don't really have a chapter in the Bible that says, hey, this is the work, this is an exhaustive list of the work of the bishop, the overseer, the elder, or the pastor. So we're going to see that there's 3 Greek words that define this bishop. Now, Paul uses the Greek episkopos here, which is the bishop. So let's define that word first, and that word means an inspector. Okay, and it's important that we all do this, I think, as a church, as a local body of Christ, to go through this, to even for the elders that are in place, for all of us to be reminded, this is who these men are. You know what, I'm failing to mention one thing too before we start looking at that. I wanted to say this, that the Apostle Paul says, faithful, that's trustworthy as a saying, that if a man seeks the office of a bishop, he desires good work. Let's keep going, because what I was going to say is in the next verse. It's the idea of the present tense must be. But let's talk about the office of the bishop. And again, that entire phrase, office of the bishop, is actually one word in the Greek. And it means, so what is a bishop? What is an overseer? He's an inspector, overseer, manager, chief, boss, watcher, guardian, one who has oversight. The office of watching over, an overseer, guardian, one set to watch or to be a bishop. Now that's from, I use two sources through the years, and a lot of trial and error, and a lot of talking with other preachers. I have come to use two Greek lexicons that are very reliable. I stay completely away from Vines, and I would recommend everybody do that. But Moulton and Liddell and Scott are the two that I read these definitions from. So this is when we talk about the bishop, we're talking about the one who watches. He's very observant of who? The people in the local church. Not the church down the road. That's going to be somebody else, some other eldership there. Our eldership is observant of what's going on here. Okay, that's the word bishop. Now, you know as well as I do that the word elder from Acts chapter 20 and verse 17, Acts chapter 20 and verse 28, when we look at those two verses, we see the Apostle Paul using the word elder, presbyteros, in similitude with episkopos at verse 28. So I know that the elder is the episkopos. But when you're talking about the presbytery, which is the elder, this means someone who's a senior, advanced in age. Okay, so now I see that here's this one who watches. He's observant of the congregation. He's the chief. He's the boss. He's over. He has the oversight of the congregation. And he's not a young man. He's an older man. And as we go through the qualifications, we see that it takes time to develop a lot of these types of things. And then the third word that it defines the elder is the issue of at Acts 20 and verse 28, when he talks about feed or pastoring the church, he says, take heed unto yourselves and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you bishops, to feed the church of the Lord, which he purchased with his own blood. Now, that word feed, again, that's an English word. And to me, when I start looking at the definitions of this, I don't know that that's a great translation. But the word literally means to tend, watch, supervise a flock. A herdsman, a shepherd, captain or chief that cherishes or minds. So, oftentimes when people talk about the work of elder, they compare them to a shepherd. A shepherd over sheep. And what does that shepherd do? That shepherd cares immensely. What was the word that was used? He cherishes the people that are under his charge. His observation is on them. He's watching them. Why? Because he cherishes them. He cares about them. He wants them to go to heaven. In fact, at Hebrews 13 verse 18, he will be responsible for all the souls. And when you look at that Hebrews 13 passage, you think about that, this is a high responsibility for a man to step into this role. Imagine standing before the Lord one day and you're an elder to church. He said, well, what happened to brother so-and-so? Well, we just kind of didn't really care enough about that guy. And he was a sheep in your fold. And so, in my mind through the years, I've thought long and hard about the issue of being an elder. And this is a part of it that should give us fearful reverence for the office. That I would be, you would be, or those in that office would be responsible for these souls. And so that's why I had my Bible marked You know, Jesus talks about what a good shepherd is at Matthew 18. I'll just read a few verses to you. I'm looking at verse 12 here. He says, Jesus said, how do you think if any man has 100 sheep and one of them go astray, does he not leave the 99 and go into the mountains and seek that which has gone astray? And if so be that he finds it, verily I say unto you, he rejoices over it more than the 99 which have not gone astray. And so forth. So the idea of a shepherd is that each, like 1 Corinthians 12, each person within the body of Christ is highly valuable. It's not as though, we point and say, well, I use Casey. I wouldn't know the entree. She might get mad at me. But, it's not as though Casey goes off. She doesn't want to do the Lord anymore. And imagine an elder saying, well, you're kind of worthless anyway. We don't care about you. Well, okay, so now that gets back to the idea of Hebrews 13. They give account for every one of the sheep that are under their care. So, when we look at the definitions, we see the seriousness of the work, and it's no wonder then that he says the bishop therefore must be. So, at verse 2, in light of this serious work regarding every individual in a local body, these men therefore must be. And that's the Greek day, which means binding necessity. That's the one I was going to get at earlier, verse 2 here. This is where it's at. The bishop, therefore, must be. That's binding necessity. And that means that this is the way it has to be with these guys. If they don't meet these qualifications, they do not serve. Now, before you say anything, let me finish this. This word is also present tense, okay? Which, present tense, let me just read this to you real quick. Bobby, hold your thought. Please don't forget it. Present tense, where are we at? Verb tenses. Present tense, okay. So, portrays action from the inside of the event without regard for beginning or end. The activity is process of progress. Portrays time from present. That's what's occurring now. So that's a helpful thing about Greek tenses. Years ago, I heard an old preacher. He was old, and he was holding a meeting, and he said, in a real crackly old guy voice, he said, if you do not translate tenses, you do not translate scriptures. And the way he said it, pointed his finger, it stuck in my mind. You got to translate tenses. So what is he saying? He's saying that these qualifications are not, somebody says, well, this guy was this 10 years ago. It's not what he is right now. People change, don't they? They grow. I got to stop. I got to let you talk, or I'll go off. Go ahead.
When a man is desiring to be an elder, he's already doing that work. He doesn't wait until he's approached about being an elder to start doing the work then. He should already be doing the work of an elder because that's his desire to be an elder.
Okay, but at the same time, he can't be an elder without meeting these qualifications.
Well, I know that, but you can't just wait till you're. I know a man that once said, "You appoint me an elder, and I'll start doing the work." Well, to me, you should already be doing the work.
Well, you should be, all these things we're about to show, you should be involved in that. Yeah. And I see what you're saying. So, for example, somebody has fallen away from the church. And what am I going to do? Well, I really don't care. That's the elder's job. Well, like you said, well, if you're any kind of a material for elder, shouldn't everybody be concerned about this person that's fallen away? Or is it just elders that should be concerned about that? The guys that are already there, I see what you're saying from that perspective. The other thing, you brought up another phrase there. You said that they desire to do this. And I thought about this with as far as the letter itself goes. Timothy has been left in Ephesus, and he's the one that this letter is written to. So this letter is written to Timothy. So the background here that we don't see is that there's a church in Ephesus that has some guys that want to be an elder. They desire to be an elder. This is a good work, But if you're going to serve in this is what you have to meet. So that tells me as well that Paul is telling Timothy, hey, there are people who desire this office, but they have to be this. They cannot be anything but this. Okay, and what are we out of time?
No.
Oh, we still got one more minute. Well, let's start it off with the first one. He says it must be, that is binding necessary, it can't be any other way, they have to be without reproach. Now that word means perfect, flawless, without fault, without blame. And at Titus 1:6 he uses the word blameless, which means to have a charge of sin against one so that they are called to give account. So okay, here's somebody who's up for an elder. The consideration for this person to be an elder is here, and the problem is that he is actively involved in sin. So he is not holy. In fact, he's separated from the Lord and his people, his church. So this man, the first thing he says, must be without reproach. And somebody would say that should be all men, all women, all members of the church. That's right. So, in some ways we say, well, this is the obvious is being stated. But imagine, and maybe sometimes not, but imagine, and maybe some of you have been part of churches where this has happened, some man gets put into the office of elder, and he is not without reproach. He is living in sin. Maybe he's married to somebody he has absolutely no right to be married to. But you know what? The guy, we like him. He seems to be spiritual minded. He seems to have Bible answer for every question that's asked. He's a good elder. He doesn't meet that qualification. So, that's interesting that the first and foremost thing is without reproach. Okay, we're out of time. Anybody have a final thought? No. Okay. Well, Lord willing, we'll pick up. We can pick up verse 2 has a lot of stuff to talk about.